Most people look at an old frontier cabin and see a small, primitive building that people used because they had no other choice. Low ceilings, rough floors, tiny windows, cramped rooms, and they assume progress replaced all of that for good reasons. Some of it, sure, but a lot of what got replaced was not replaced because it stopped working. It got replaced because it was cheap to drop during the tract housing boom of the mid-20th century. And nobody building fast, affordable subdivisions wanted to spend time on details that required actual thought about where the sun moved or how wind behaved on a particular hillside. The result is that a lot of modern homes are expensive to heat, miserable to cool, and dependent on mechanical systems that break down, cost money every month, and do nothing when the power goes out for 4 days in January. Hit subscribe before we get into this, because some of the features we're covering today are genuinely worth bringing back. And a few of them cost almost nothing to incorporate if you're building new or doing a serious renovation. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've spent years studying the construction details, shelter logic, and practical decisions that went into frontier cabins, early American farmhouses, and traditional off-grid buildings. What I keep finding is that a lot of the features people dismiss as old-fashioned were doing real mechanical work, managing heat, moisture, airflow, and light in ways that made the building more livable without any electricity at all. Modern building science has actually confirmed why many of these features worked. We just stopped building them anyway. So let's go through 15 of them. Some you can retrofit. Some only make sense in new construction. And a couple of them are worth understanding even if you never build anything, just so you can recognize what your current home is missing and why certain rooms always feel wrong. By the time we're done, you'll understand not just what these features were, but what problem each one was solving, why it worked, and whether it's actually practical to bring back today. Let's start with the one that surprises people the most. Deep roof overhangs. Modern homes in most American suburbs have a roof overhang of maybe 8 to 12 inches. Look at an old-growth cabin or a traditional farmhouse from the 1800s, and the overhang was often 2 to 3 feet or more, sometimes deeper on the south-facing side. That was not decorative. It was a solar calculation. A deep overhang on the south side of a building blocks high summer sun from hitting the wall and entering the windows. In winter, when the sun sits lower in the sky, that same overhang lets the low-angle light pass underneath it and reach the wall and windows directly. The building passively collects heat in winter and rejects heat in summer without any thermostat, any duct, or any electricity. Builders understood this relationship intuitively because they lived in the buildings and felt the consequences of getting it wrong. Modern homes dropped deep overhangs, partly for cost and partly for aesthetic fashion. Flat roof lines and minimal overhangs became popular. What replaced the passive shading function? Air conditioning, which runs on electricity, which costs money every month indefinitely. If you're building new, extending your roof overhangs to 2 feet or more on sun-facing sides is one of the highest return on investment details you can include. It costs some additional roofing material and framing. It saves energy and comfort for the life of the building. Cross ventilation through deliberate window and door placement. Frontier cabin builders placed windows and doors on opposing walls, not for the view, not for symmetry, but to create a path for air movement through the building. When one opening faces the direction of prevailing summer breezes and another opening is positioned on the opposite or adjacent side, air moves through the interior continuously. You don't need a fan. You need a pressure differential and a clear path. Modern homes frequently place windows for curb appeal, lot line privacy, or whatever the developer decided. The result is that many rooms have windows only on one wall, which gives you light but not airflow. Hot air has nowhere to escape. You close the windows and run the air conditioning. The fix in new construction is straightforward. Identify your prevailing summer wind direction before placing any opening, and make sure there is an exit path directly across the interior from your main entry point. In existing homes, adding a window on the windward side of a room that currently only has windows on the leeward side can make a noticeable difference without major structural work. Stack ventilation and ridge vents, the version that actually worked. Heat rises. Every frontier builder knew this, not as a science lesson, but as a daily reality. Old cabins in warmer climates often had ventilation openings near the roofline, sometimes a cupola, sometimes simply a vented gable, sometimes a ridgeline gap covered by a secondary roof cap. That allowed hot air to escape from the highest point of the building. The principle is called stack ventilation, or the chimney effect, when you're not talking about an actual chimney. Hot air at the ceiling finds the highest available exit and pulls cooler air in through lower openings as it escapes. If your low openings face prevailing breezes, you get cross ventilation from below, combined with stack ventilation from above. Together, these two systems can make a building genuinely comfortable in moderate summer heat with no mechanical assistance. Modern ridge vents exist, and some builders use them well. But the combination of deliberate low inlets and high outlets designed around specific air movement is rarely incorporated into tract homes. The building is treated as a sealed box that gets cooled mechanically rather than a managed airflow system. Central chimney placement rather than exterior chimneys. This one drives me a little nuts because it is so obviously correct when you think about it. And yet, the exterior chimney became a dominant design feature for decades. An exterior chimney loses a significant portion of its heat through the exterior wall. The warm gases travel up the flue, but the masonry mass of the chimney, which stores and radiates heat, is sitting outside the building envelope where that radiated heat benefits the outdoors rather than the interior. In hard winters, an exterior chimney also loses draft when the flue is cold, making it harder to start fires and more prone to backdrafting smoke into the living space. Traditional frontier cabins and colonial homes built their chimneys in the center of the building. The masonry mass, stone or brick, absorbed heat from the fire and radiated it slowly back into the interior for hours after the fire died down. In a multi-room house, a large central chimney could serve multiple fireplaces back to back on different sides, while the mass itself acted as a heat battery for the whole structure. You see this principle in traditional Scandinavian and Eastern European tile stoves as well. It was not an American invention. It was a universal conclusion reached by cold climate builders everywhere who lived with the consequences of poor chimney placement. Thermal mass floors, stone, brick, and packed clay. A dirt floor sounds like poverty. And in many cases, it was exactly that. A floor someone built when they had no other option. But a properly managed packed clay floor, or a stone or brick floor, does something a wood floor does not do. It stores temperature. Thermal mass materials absorb heat slowly and release it slowly. A stone floor in a sunny room collects solar energy during the day and releases it gradually through the night. In summer, that same mass stays cool and radiates coolness into the lower portion of the room where people actually live. This is why a stone church or a traditional adobe home feels cool in July, even without air conditioning. The thick mass doesn't heat up quickly, and what coolness it stores from the night persists well into the afternoon. Wood floors are comfortable underfoot, they're warm to the touch, they're easier to maintain and far more sanitary than bare clay. Nobody is arguing you should rip out your hardwood, but incorporating a thermal mass element in sun-facing rooms, a brick hearth extended across the floor in a south-facing sunroom, a stone tile floor on the main sun collecting level, can genuinely reduce heating and cooling loads without any mechanical system at all. Frontier homesteads commonly built a separate summer kitchen, sometimes a detached structure, sometimes a heavily ventilated lean-to addition, where cooking happened during hot months. The logic was simple. A wood-fired cooking stove generates enormous heat. If that heat is generated inside the house, it has to be removed by the same systems trying to keep the house cool. A separate summer kitchen contains the heat where it is produced and lets it exhaust directly, while the main house stays cooler with less effort. Modern equivalents would be a well-ventilated outdoor kitchen, a properly exhausted screened cooking porch, or even a garage setup for summer canning and cooking. The principle is the same. Don't fight your own cooling system by generating massive heat loads inside the envelope you're trying to cool. The dogtrot house, 2 enclosed rooms separated by an open covered breezeway, was a deliberate airflow design. Wind moved through the covered breezeway continuously. The covered outdoor space was shaded and often cooler than outdoors. The 2 enclosed rooms flanking it were partially shaded by the shared roof, and the whole arrangement allowed the family to sleep, eat, and work in the breezeway during hot weather, while still having enclosed, protected storage and sleeping spaces. You see variations of this logic in traditional tropical architecture worldwide. It is not specific to Appalachian frontier culture. It is what happens when builders in hot climates think carefully about airflow and shade, rather than simply sealing a box and cooling it mechanically. A modern interpretation might be a true breezeway connecting a garage to the main house, or a covered outdoor room that is architecturally integrated with the home's roof system and oriented into prevailing summer breezes. It is a carefully considered structure that uses the Earth's stable temperature, typically between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, at depths of 4 to 6 feet in most North American climates, to store food without electricity. Frontier homesteaders knew that temperature was only part of the equation. Humidity control mattered for different foods. Root vegetables preferred high humidity. Apples needed airflow. Dairy products needed consistent cold. A well-designed root cellar had separate sections, controlled ventilation that could be opened or closed depending on outdoor temperatures, and drainage that prevented water intrusion from turning a food storage room into a mold chamber. Modern homes almost universally lack any passive food storage option. A well-designed root cellar built into a hillside or under a north-facing addition could store months of produce without consuming a watt of electricity. The challenge is building it correctly. Drainage, insulation of the entry, ventilation management, and rodent exclusion are all design problems that need to be solved. A poorly built root cellar can ruin more food than it saves. Cold air settles near the floor. Frontier cabin builders who understood this often slept in lofts on raised platforms, or built beds that elevated the sleeper off the floor by a foot or more. In an unheated cabin on a January night, the difference in temperature between floor level and loft level could be substantial. Modern sleeping lofts exist mostly in small apartments and tiny homes, but the principle is useful in any home where nighttime temperatures drop significantly and where supplemental heating is limited. A raised bed, not the decorative height of a tall bed frame, but a genuine sleeping platform a foot or more above the floor, takes advantage of the warmest air in the room without running any mechanical system. You stepped into the vestibule, closed the outer door, then opened the inner door. In cold climates, this prevented the main living space from being blasted with outside air every time someone entered or exited. The vestibule buffered the temperature exchange. Modern mudrooms sometimes serve this function, but more commonly, they're storage and boot removal spaces without an airlock design. The outer door and the inner door are rarely both operable in a way that prevents direct exposure of the main interior to outside conditions. A true vestibule with deliberate airlock function, both doors never simultaneously open, can meaningfully reduce heating demand in cold climates. South-facing walls got sun all day in winter. North-facing walls got none. A north-facing window lost heat continuously while providing minimal benefit. Builders in cold climates gradually concentrated openings on south and east faces and minimized north-facing openings. Modern homes frequently place windows based on the view, the floor plan layout, or what looks balanced from the street. A large north-facing picture window in a living room is a heat sink in cold climates. Glass has almost no insulation value, and a north-facing window contributes no solar gain while losing conducted heat continuously. The same window on the south face would contribute solar warmth in winter and could be managed with an overhang for summer shading. Passive solar design incorporates this principle formally, but the underlying logic was embedded in traditional vernacular building centuries before anyone named it. A deep covered porch on the south or west side of a house keeps direct afternoon sun off the wall and windows during the hottest part of a summer day. It provides a shaded outdoor space that is significantly cooler than full sun. It keeps wind-driven rain off the wall and foundation, and it creates a buffer zone between outside and inside that reduces thermal shock when moving between the two. Modern covered porches exist, but they're often shallow, unscreened, and positioned based on the lot layout rather than sun angle. A genuinely functional covered porch is wide enough to provide real shade at the wall, typically 8 to 10 feet deep, and positioned on sides that receive high-intensity sun during hot months. A screened porch on the sleeping end of the house allowed families to sleep with full airflow, insect protection, and significantly cooler temperatures than an enclosed bedroom with a closed window. These became vestigial features that got converted to sunrooms or enclosed additions over decades. In a world of rising electricity costs and increasing summer heat, a screened sleeping porch makes genuine climate sense for many parts of the country. But the thermal mass of a thick log wall means it changes temperature slowly. On a hot day, the inside of that wall is still at night temperature well into the afternoon. On a cold night, the stored warmth from a day of sun and internal heating bleeds slowly outward for hours. Modern framing with 2x6 walls and spray foam can achieve excellent insulation values, but it lacks mass. The building heats and cools quickly with changes in outside temperature. Mass and insulation are different properties, and combining them, as earth-sheltered buildings, rammed earth construction, and some modern high-mass designs do, produces a different comfort quality than insulation alone. For most people, this is not a practical retrofit. But if you're building from scratch and looking at alternative materials, understanding the mass versus insulation distinction matters. A well-designed building can use both. An attached, covered wood storage area, accessible from inside the house without going fully outside into winter weather, was a standard feature of cold climate homestead design. A fuel storage area that was also ventilated, so wood could continue drying rather than sitting in a closed, humid space, was a working part of the heating system. Modern homes don't have wood storage because most of them don't use wood heat as a primary system. But for anyone with a wood stove or fireplace insert as a primary or backup heat source, this feature matters enormously. Wet wood burns poorly, creates creosote, and delivers far less heat than properly dried wood. Storage that protects from rain, allows airflow, and is accessible without suiting up in full winter gear is a functional design detail that makes the difference between a wood heating system that's practical and one that's miserable. Now look, I'm not suggesting you tear out your drywall and start milling your own logs. Modern construction has genuine advantages: structural engineering, fire safety, air quality, sanitation, that belong in any honest comparison. The old methods were not universally superior. They were responses to specific conditions, with the materials available. But some of these features were abandoned, not because better solutions replaced them, but because cheap construction replaced them. And cheap construction that depends entirely on mechanical systems works fine until the systems fail, the energy bills climb, or you're trying to stay comfortable when the grid is down for a week. The builders who designed these features into their homes were not working with worse information than we have. In many cases, they were working with more direct feedback. When your house is too hot, you feel it that night. When your chimney smokes back, you smell it immediately. When your root cellar floods, you lose your winter food. There was no middle layer of utility bills and service contracts to absorb the cost of poor decisions. That directness produced some genuinely elegant solutions. Not all of them. Some frontier cabins were cold, damp, smoky, and miserable, and the people who lived in them would have traded for modern construction in a heartbeat. But among the features that worked, the ones that solar designers and passive house architects have been rediscovering for decades, there are 15 we just walked through that your home could probably use. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, hit the like button, leave a comment with the feature you think deserves to come back the most, and subscribe if you want to keep exploring what traditional builders understood that we sometimes forget. I'm Jerry Davis, and I'll see you in the next one.